It was a bright morning at Andrews Air Force Base. President Donald Trump had just wrapped up a briefing with senior military officials. As he made his way toward the motorcade, a line of Air Force personnel stood at attention, ready for the customary handshake. Most exchanges were quick. Firm grip, brief eye contact, and a nod. But when Trump reached Sergeant Ethan Cole, 26 years old, the moment stretched. Ethan's grip lingered, his lips parting as if words pressed escape. "What's your name, soldier?" Trump asked, catching the hesitation. "Sergeant Ethan Cole, sir," he replied, steady but weighted. Something in Ethan's voice pulled Trump to pause. The line of guards exchanged subtle glances. This wasn't standard protocol. Ethan drew a breath. "Sir, there's something I've never told anyone in command." Trump tightened his hold, leaning closer. "Go on." The engines, the marching boots, the background ceremony, all seemed to fade. For that moment, Trump wasn't just a president. He was a listener. "My father, Captain Daniel Cole, served in the Air Force," Ethan said quietly. "He died in service when I was 12. His last words to me were that someday I'd understand what sacrifice meant." Trump's expression softened. "I thought I understood," Ethan continued, voice tightening. "But standing here guarding the man my father once dreamed of meeting, it feels like the circle has closed. And yet I still wonder, was his sacrifice remembered or just lost to history?" The honesty hit hard. Trump placed his other hand over Ethan's. "Your father's sacrifice will never be forgotten, Sergeant, and neither will yours. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones no one can see." Ethan blinked back tears. The ceremonial handshake line had stopped cold, the silence pressing in. An aide leaned toward Trump, reminding him of the schedule. Trump waved him off. "Tell me about your father," he urged. Ethan steadied himself. He was a pilot. Rescue missions. On his last mission, he went back for a downed soldier. He'd been cleared to return to base, but he chose to go back. His aircraft was hit before he made it out. Trump exhaled, his tone low. He chose to go back. "Yes, sir. That man lived. He has a family now. I found him once, just to see if my father's choice meant anything. It did. But I still wonder if my father should have lived instead." Trump finished the thought for him. "And you wonder if his sacrifice was worth the cost." Ethan's lips trembled as he nodded. "Son," Trump said firmly, "your father lived the creed, service before self. He didn't just give his life for that soldier. He gave it for you, for every American. That doesn't fade with time." For the first time, Ethan felt a flicker of release from the doubt he'd carried like an inheritance. Then Trump did something no one expected. He turned to Ethan's commanding officer. "Sergeant Cole will ride with me today." Gasps rippled through the line. Ethan froze. "Sir, I'm on duty." "Consider an order," Trump replied with a half-smile. Minutes later, Ethan found himself inside the armored vehicle, heart pounding across from the most powerful man in the world. "You know why you're here?" Trump asked. Ethan shook his head. "Because I hear numbers, statistics, reports all day long. But what matters most are the stories of those who serve. Your story deserves to be heard." "Sir, I'm just one soldier," Ethan whispered. "There's no such thing as just one soldier," Trump said. "Every story matters. Sometimes it only takes one story to change everything." Ethan sat back, breath catching. For the first time, he believed it. The motorcade rolled on, sunlight flashing against the glass. Inside, the conversation continued. Not about politics or power, but about father-son sacrifice and the quiet weight of duty. And in that car, Sergeant Ethan Cole realized he wasn't chasing his father's shadow anymore. He was walking his own path, carrying his father's legacy forward in ways he had never imagined. Every generation inherits the courage of the one before it. But what we do with that courage, that's our choice. Trump's words lingered in the armored vehicle, low and steady. "Your father gave you courage, Sergeant, but what you build with it, that's yours alone." Ethan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. "Sir, do you ever question your choices?" Trump gave a small chuckle. "Every day. But I've learned this. Questioning means you care. It's the careless who never question." The answer struck Ethan like a revelation. For years, he'd buried doubts, ashamed of them. But now, sitting across from the president, he realized those doubts weren't weakness. They were proof of humanity. The motorcade came to a stop at a nearby hangar. Trump leaned closer. "Sergeant, you've carried your father's memory with honor. But don't forget, you're writing your own story. Let's make sure people hear it." Inside the hangar, cameras clicked as Trump toured with senior officers. Ethan walked just a step behind, every moment feeling surreal. Then Trump stopped before a display of medals belonging to fallen airmen. He gestured toward Ethan. "This young man's father gave his life in service," Trump said. "His story is a reminder of what these medals truly stand for." The room fell silent. Ethan's throat tightened as dozens of eyes turned toward him. He hadn't expected his private words to become public. But Trump wasn't exploiting him. He was honoring him. Placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder, Trump continued. "Too often we honor sacrifice with ceremonies, but forget the families who carry the weight afterward. Sergeant Cole represents them all. Their strength deserves more than applause. It deserves action." The officers nodded solemnly. Ethan felt his eyes sting with tears. For the first time, his father's story wasn't just a private burden. It was alive, respected in the most unexpected way. Trump leaned down, whispering, "Your father is here, son. Trust me on that." For the first time in years, Ethan felt peace. That evening, back in his quarters, exhaustion pulled at him. On his desk sat a worn letter he had read countless times, the last letter his father wrote before his final mission. He unfolded it carefully. "Ethan, if I don't come home, remember this. Life isn't about how long you live, but how much of yourself you give." Ethan traced the faded ink. For years, those words felt like a riddle. But after his talk with Trump, the meaning came clear. His father had wanted him to repeat his path. He wanted Ethan to live his own, fearlessly, generously, without regret. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel trapped in his father's shadow. He felt guided by it. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered, folding the letter. That same night, in the Oval Office, Trump sat alone. Reports and memos cluttered his desk, but his thoughts drifted to Sergeant Ethan Cole. Asterisk, do sacrifices matter? Are we remembered? Asterisk, the young man's words echoed. Trump stared at the portraits of past presidents. Leadership, he realized, wasn't about numbers. It was about stories like Ethan's father. He picked up the phone. "I want to report on benefits for families of fallen service members. And I want to hear directly from them, not just statistics." "Arrange it." The aide stammered, surprised by the urgency. "Yes, sir." Trump hung up, whispering to himself. Sometimes the smallest voice changes everything. The next week, Ethan received unexpected orders. Report to Washington, D.C. confused. He packed his uniform and boarded a military flight. At the White House, he was escorted to the grand halls until he reached the Oval Office. Trump was waiting. "Sergeant Cole," he said warmly, "good to see you again." Ethan saluted. "Sir, I wasn't expecting this." Trump motioned for him to sit. "I asked you here because your story reminded me of something vital. Real change begins with listening, and America needs to hear your story." Ethan froze. "Sir, me? I'm just a guard." Trump shook his head. "No, you're a son who carries his father's sacrifice. You represent thousands. Would you be willing to speak publicly, not as a soldier, but as yourself?" Ethan's chest tightened. The thought terrified him. Yet, deep down, he knew what his father would want. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice firm. Weeks later, under bright stage lights at a national event honoring veterans and service families, Ethan stood before a sea of faces. Soldiers, widows, children, officials. Trump introduced him, then stepped back. Ethan's heart pounded. "My name is Sergeant Ethan Cole. I'm here not because I'm special, but because my father was." He told his father's story, the rescue mission, the sacrifice, the doubts that haunted him. His voice trembled, but the truth carried weight. "For years, I wondered if my father's life was wasted. But now I know. Every act of sacrifice plants a seed in someone else's future. My father's choice gave a man another chance at life. That man's family is proof that sacrifice echoes. The audience rose to their feet, a standing ovation that shook the hall. Trump himself looked moved. Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. Afterward, widows, children, and fellow soldiers crowded him. One gray-haired woman clasped his hands. "My husband died in Iraq. For years I wondered if it mattered. Tonight, you gave me peace." Ethan realized then, by speaking his truth, he had given others permission to heal, too. A few days later, a package arrived for him. Inside was a letter. Asterisk, "Dear Ethan, I saw your speech. I'm alive because of your father." Asterisk. Ethan's hands trembled as he read. The legacy of Captain Daniel Cole lived on, not just in his son, but in the lives he saved and the countless others touched by his story. And for the first time, Ethan knew his father's sacrifice had not only mattered, it had changed the world. Ethan's hands trembled as he read the letter. Asterisk, "My children and grandchildren exist because of him. His sacrifice didn't just save one life. It created generations." Asterisk. Tears blurred the words. For years, Ethan had wondered if his father's death truly mattered. Now he had proof. "You did it, Dad," he whispered. "You really did." That evening, in his private quarters, President Trump replayed Ethan's speech in his mind. He was not a man who often let his guard down, but tonight was different. He thought about his own family, his children, his grandchildren. What legacy would he leave them? Would they remember him for politics, or for the moments when he truly listened? Ethan's words reminded him that leadership wasn't about power. It was about people. Closing his eyes, Trump whispered, "Sometimes the greatest lessons come from the quietest voices." Back on base, Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. His father's memory was no longer a burden. It was a mission. He began speaking at schools, community centers, and veterans groups, sharing his father's story and urging others to honor their own. After one talk at a high school, a boy approached him. "My dad's deployed," he said nervously. "I'm scared he won't come back. But hearing about your dad makes me proud." Ethan knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "Your dad is a hero. And so are you, for being brave enough to wait for him." That's when Ethan realized he wasn't just telling his father's story. He was helping others write their own. Months later, Trump invited him back to the Oval Office. "Ethan," he said, "the day I met you, I made a promise, not just to listen, but to act. We've expanded programs for families of fallen service members. That happened because of your story." Ethan's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say this," Trump replied, "that you'll keep telling the story, because policies may fade, but stories last forever." Ethan nodded firmly. "I promise." On the anniversary of his father's death, Ethan knelt at his grave in Arlington. He placed a letter at the base of the headstone. "Dad," he whispered, "I used to think I was chasing your shadow. Now I know. I'm carrying your light." A breeze swept through the rows of white stones. For the first time in years, Ethan felt peace, not mourning his father's absence, but celebrating his presence in every life his sacrifice had touched. Months later, his speech was replayed at a national ceremony, broadcast across the country. Millions watched. Hashtags like hashtag Heart of Service and hashtag Military Legacy trended worldwide as people began sharing their own stories of sacrifice and remembrance. Trump, watching from the White House, turned to an aide. This started with a handshake. Never underestimate the power of one conversation. That night, Ethan's mother called. Her voice trembled. "Ethan, I saw you on TV. Your father would be so proud. For years I carried the pain of losing him, but now I carry the pride of seeing his story live through you." Ethan closed his eyes, tears streaming. "Mom, we're not just surviving anymore. We're honoring him." For the first time in years, their family felt whole again. One morning, a handwritten note arrived. Asterisk, "Ethan, meeting you reminded me why I serve. You showed me that leadership is not about titles, but about listening to the voices of sacrifice. Thank you for changing how I see service, and for reminding America what it means to remember. Donald J. Trump asterisk." Ethan held the letter to his chest. It wasn't just recognition. It was proof that even the most powerful man in the country could be moved by a simple, honest story. A year later, Trump visited the base again. Once more, a line of guards stood at attention. Ethan, now promoted, was among them. When Trump reached him, they shook hands. This time, Ethan wasn't the uncertain young guard he had once been. He was a man who knew his purpose. "Good to see you again, Sergeant Cole," Trump said warmly. "Good to see you, sir," Ethan smiled. "And thank you for listening that day. It changed everything." Trump gripped his hand firmly. "No, son, you changed everything." The cameras flashed, but behind the images lay something far greater. A reminder that a single story, spoken from the heart, can ripple through lives, policies, and generations. And it all began with one handshake.